Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Disney, welcome to this press conference for Tangled. As you'll probably know, this is the 50th 5.0 animated feature in the studio. It is also an enormous box office success already in the United States and throughout the rest of the world. And we're very happy, in fact, that it knocked Harry Potter off the top spot on the week that it was released. With us today are the two directors of the film, Nathan Greno and Brian Howard. The legend, of course, with his Glen Keane, and Rapunzel herself, Mandy Moore. If I can start with the two directors, in any order, gentlemen, can fight over the question. Why is it that Disney and the traditional or the classic fairy tale are such a glorious fit? There have been so many fantastic fairy tales brought to the screen by Disney, and it can't be an accident. Why is it that this has been something that's worked since 1937 onward?
Let's go.
Me? Okay.
Sure.
I guess it's just become a tradition at the studio, and it's something, at least for Byron and I, we were very aware of that. When you say Snow White, when you say Beauty and the Beast, or when you say Aladdin, even, you always think of the Disney versions when you think of any of these things. And when we were approaching this movie, taking the classic story of Rapunzel and bringing that to life, we realized, if you do a great job, these films live on forever and potentially become the definitive version of that. And Disney seems to do it. They do it in a way that's like just so sincere and so emotional, the way they tell their stories. I mean, there's been films lately like like Shrek, for instance, where, and I'm not putting the film down, but it's it's kind of like it pokes fun at these classic stories and has kind of a snarky attitude about it. And I love that our studio doesn't do that. I mean, we embrace what's great about these classic stories, and yeah.
Yeah, I think people actually were worried the fact that when we said we wanted to make a contemporary film, people automatically thought, okay, well, contemporary and modern means cynical. And that when you watch this film, Tangled isn't cynical at all. It's very heartfelt, genuine tale. And I think we do that again because, like Nathan was saying, because we know these films will live on far beyond us, and you want these films to not be too topical and too tied to the period that they're made, so they can live on past the generations that first see them.
Glen, you've done so much in your 35 years with the studio, but your achievements in this film must give you tremendous satisfaction.
Well, for me, this film is it's a marathon. Something I was starting to think about developing in '96, and to see it actually come to fruition is really wonderful, particularly when my normal reaction when I see one of the films I've worked on is the more times I see it, the more mistakes I see in the animation. The Mermaid and Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast. It's like, oh gosh, I wish I could have that back and rework it. This film, every time I see it, I'm like, this gets better. I just keep seeing more and more wonderful little touches that the animators put into it, and I am becoming more and more convinced that it is the best animation that Disney has ever done. And I'm astounded by it. Now, I don't know how to animate on the computer, and I'm really thankful that I worked with a couple other guys. We called it our triumvirate, John Kars and Clay Cadis, who really understood computer animation, but loved and embraced hand-drawn, which is Disney's heritage. And they found tools and ways for me to be able to contribute and participate in the film where I could draw over top of the computer animation, and I could suggest, okay, if I was animating the scene, I'd push the arc of the attitude a little bit stronger in this character. I'd exaggerate it a little further, or we could make this look, make that eye just open up a little bit further, and then the animators would have those drawings back in their offices waiting for them, that they could they could apply, they could adapt it. I mean, that was our goal, is to take the best of both worlds, the best of hand-drawn, the best of computer, and put it into one.
Thank you. Mandy, you've joined an elite club because you're now a Disney princess. I wondered if you could tell us just what that means to you, and if you can look back to your childhood and again tell us who your favourite Disney princesses were from days gone by.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. I mean, I sit here and think, what little girl doesn't dream about being a Disney princess? But for that to...
And some little boys.
Yeah, of course. Everyone is included. It's, you know, Disney, I grew up in Orlando, so somehow I feel like it's in my blood a little bit, but The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast and Aladdin and, you know, so many films before that were such seminal parts of my childhood that it's still kind of mind-boggling to sit here and think that now I'm you know, part of that Disney lineage. It's so cool. But I would say The Little Mermaid is probably my favorite, just because it's the first recollection I have of going to the movie theater and seeing a movie and then owning it on VHS and wearing out the VHS, watching it incessantly over and over and over again.
And as a kid, did you ever have a Disney princess outfit for maybe Halloween? I
didn't. I do remember having The Little Mermaid. I had The Little Mermaid bed sheets. I had the sheets and the comforter set, yeah.
We'll go to someone who I know had his bedroom totally decorated out in Disney. Anwar.
Glenn, given your extended tenure with Disney, have you ever chanced upon this material, the Rapunzel story, previously, and did you look back at other efforts to bring it to the screen?
No, there's a weird thing about me and characters with hair. I mean, from Ariel or Pocahontas or Tarzan with his dreadlocks, and now Rapunzel, and it's like I'm trying to make up some loss of something in my life. I'm not sure what it is. But I find that you're drawn to certain stories. And there's something about fairy tales that have deep roots. They connect really deeply to you, and those are the stories that I find myself drawn to. I love characters that believe the impossible is possible. At one point, I animated the villains in our stories, and big bear or a giant. But then in Little Mermaid, Ariel just really called to me, and I started to fall in love with characters that had that burning desire inside of them, that's this hope, and I think that's what led me to this story. And then I started to think about, well, have we done some research on it? Talked to Joe Grant, who was head of story on Snow White, and who continued to work at Disney up to about 6 years ago. He was still driving into work. He's no longer alive, but I remember asking Joe, so did you guys, did you and Walt work on this? And he says, oh yeah, I remember us working on Rapunzel and Beauty and the Beast, and that was just a really hard nut to crack. We just put it down. It was difficult, and you understand why. Those were like the last two fairy tales that we cracked. They just take place in a tower, or in the dining room, sitting at a table. I mean, that was, I think, the thing that was so wonderful to see. What Byron and Nathan brought was bringing Rapunzel out of the tower, bringing this really fresh new take to the fairy tale.
Given that as well, for all the technology that's at your disposal here, do you find yourself thinking, what would Frank or Ollie or Joe have done in this situation, so that while you're using the cutting edge technology, you're also using the very best traditions of the Disney hand-drawn animation history?
Well, I know that Frank and Ollie were always saying, Glenn, you're going to do greater things than us someday. Which you just could have took it like, yeah, come on, don't try to make me feel good. I know we're never going to do anything as great as you guys. But I think this film, I start to understand, wow, in what dimension this is moving animation further forward. There are moments in this picture, Mandy's performance was so sincere, so real. You've all seen the film, right? Mm-hmm. Where Rapunzel is crying, singing to Flynn as he's dying, or as he has died. This was so deep, and we have a group of girls at work, animators, who wanted those scenes. And I remember after seeing Little Mermaid, Ollie said, "You know, we never would have animated it that way." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you animated some faces that were kind of ugly. We always tried to do everything pretty." And I remember specifically John Cars in the scene where Rapunzel is looking into Flynn's face and crying, and he was saying, "Go for the ugly face, go for the ugly face." I mean, it's that moment when a character is crying and all the muscles are pulling and contorting, and you don't want a camera on your face, but it was right there. And it was so beautiful, so moving. When these guys issued those scenes to the animators, there were tears in their eyes. It was an incredibly emotional film. And in those ways, I really do see what Frank and Ollie were saying, that someday you're going to do something greater than us, emotionally and artistically and in every way.
Phil?
I have a suspicion that this is probably going to end up as a live stage show. Would you two guys like that? Would you like to be involved? And are you up for auditioning for the live stage performance, Mandy? And secondly,
She have the part if she wants it.
and secondly, am I reading too much into this? Flynn, Errol Flynn, possibly?
Oh,
Where do we start?
I'll take the stage show part. You take the flip.
Okay.
You know what's great about Disney as well, and great about working with this company, is that you do see these films live on past the actual cinema experience. You know, you see the character. You know, the first time that Nathan and I saw Flynn and Rapunzel in the theme parks was an amazing day for us, because there, kind of in front of us, were these characters sort of brought to life. And before the film had even come out, there were lines of families waiting to meet these new characters, and to see that sort of emotional investment already before the film is even familiar to audiences was amazing to us. And the fact that, you know, they've talked to us about perhaps in like one of the Disneylands building this tower, or building part of her kingdom, and knowing that, you know, something that we all helped to create could live on far past us is an amazing thing. And that goes to those stage shows as well. If it becomes, you know, it certainly has the potential, obviously, of, you know, becoming some sort of a stage musical with, you know, the great music by Alan Menken and lyrics by Glen, and I'm sure they'd love to expand on that. And but yeah, I definitely would support any sort of expansion of that world. Mm-hmm. And Mandy, you've got the part if you want.
Thank you. Thank you.
Would you do it?
Mandy, would you like to tread the boards on Broadway, for instance, doing this?
I've always loved the idea of being on Broadway. It's sort of the ultimate dream for me. I have to figure out how the hair would work. You know? That's a lot to lug around.
That's true.
Had some sort of trick with the hair.
Your neck
I don't
would be
know.
huge.
Exactly, my neck muscles would
crack walnuts in your neck.
And the Errol Flynn connection.
Oh, right. Yeah, you know, I mean, when we were putting together, when we were trying to figure out who Flynn Rider is in this movie, you know, we looked at a bunch of different sources. I mean, I think Byron and I were just trying to think, like, well, what kind of characters do we like? And when you look back at some of the past Disney sort of princes or something, a lot of them are kind of soft, and they're not anyone that, like, we think are that cool, I guess.
They're good guys.
They're good guys, but yeah, they're good. Yeah, they're good guys. And so, and I guess we sort of took that to the other extreme, and we like sort of cocky, arrogant sort of characters. And I think there were people in our building that were a little worried, because we were up in the story room and they were hearing these rumors of, like, well, it's not a prince, it's a thief. And you know, he's kind of a ladies' man, and he's, you know, very arrogant, and I think they're like, what is going on in that story room? I think the trick is, when you're creating a character like that, if you have this cocky character, you have to, like, sort of hit him over the head with a frying pan like a dozen times or something, and he needs to he needs to kind of pay for being that way, because those characters, if they're done right, they can be so funny, and they on the flip side, if they're not done right, they can be really off-putting. So we were looking at, you know, like, we like Han Solo, we think he's great, and
there are bits of a lot of people, like, you know, Gene Kelly's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of influences went into it.
Talking of influence and inspiration then, Byron and Nathan, is it going too far to suggest that the Wicked Witch owes a lot to Cher?
People keep coming back to that. It's true. Well, I guess maybe it's because, you know, Cher is very sort of gothic and exotic looking, and definitely she was one of the people we looked at, you know, visually as far as like what gives you sort of a striking character. But, you know, also, you know, Donna Murphy, who is her voice in the English version, also really heavily influenced what Gothel looked like, and she was a hard one to crack. I mean, I think, you know, Glen had explored that character for many years and tried to figure out like what does this person need to be? Because in this final version of Tangled, she's not really a witch. She's not really a sorceress. You know, she's got this one thing she can do with the hair, but beyond that, she doesn't really have magic. So she has to be this very intelligent, compelling, manipulative character who's very smart and who actually can convince this poor girl that she's actually her mother. And so, in order to contrast her to what Rapunzel looks like, Rapunzel's very kind of petite and got that blonde hair. We needed to go completely the opposite direction. So Gothel is very tall and curvy. She's very voluptuous, and she's got this very exotic look to her. Even down to that curly hair we're trying to say visually like this is not this girl's mother. And whereas the queen is designed almost precisely like Rapunzel, down to the little, you know, details in her eyes and her nose and mouth shape. We tried to do as much visually to tell you that this is where this girl belongs, and that this woman is not her mother. But again, as you know, many influences kind of like go into these characters, and we kind of kind of soak it all in like a sponge, and then we kind of put it down as the one single character.